we decided that we would be 60% spicy, 40% calm. So we're gonna talk about the real of building companies in the city, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and what these founders' experience has been so far. So to get started, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're building. Give us your elevator pitch, if you will.
Great to be here with you all. There it is. Great to be here with you all tonight. My name is Nick Freeman. I'm the co-founder and chief growth officer with Innovare. We're an education technology company where we empower education, nonprofit, and foundational leaders around data infrastructure and strategic planning. So what does that mean? We break down silos of data, whether it be assessment, finance, HR, operations, into a more holistic dashboard that provides clear insights, and then provide them with a platform to really document the strategies they're utilizing to impact our students and communities. So really bringing together an ecosystem of interoperability, transparency, really to show true outcomes around success metrics that aren't always seen, right? We're not just talking about attendance rates and assessment scores. We're really talking about the things that our communities care about, right? How are we engaging with communities? How are we really ensuring we're giving back and building together? So super excited to be here with you all today and share a little about the journey.
Hello, my name is Ibrahim Alinor. I am the current Vice President of TwoFlow Ventures and the co-founder of City Health Tech. My background as a serial entrepreneur working in community management software from research commercialization, where we partner with Fortune 100 companies and the leading academic institutions to commercialize research in digital manufacturing, cybersecurity, and city solutions. And that's kind of where my passion lies, on how we build the healthy cities of the future. One of the products I worked on was the Chicago Health Atlas. And that's when I learned that depending on your zip code, your health outcome is very different. And so as I think about how we build our communities, I want to do it through the lens of health equity. Depending on where you are, the decisions we make should be driven by how that impacts the health of the population. So that's what inspired me to start City Health Tech, where we invented a small Internet of Things device that sits next to the faucet to track and encourage hand washing times. Because 95% of people do not wash their hands properly, and 80% of disease is spread through touch. And going on that journey, being a founder and trying to fundraise, really put me in the interesting world of which I call climbing the ladder of information, understanding what it's like to be someone who's working at a company, to then be a founder, then to understand what this weird venture capital world is, and now being on the other side of the table where we're investing and building companies in digital health and biotechnology with a focus on health equity.
Hello everybody, my name is Jerome Dishman. I'm co-founder of Allison FinTech. We're banking as a service platform, connecting startups and locally to community banks. Background, two-time founder. Also, prior life was a co-founder of 1647 here in Chicago, which is the first black incubator co-working space here in the city. And working with the team here to reestablish and bring it back. So this event that we're having tonight is normal. It's not just once a month, quarterly.
Yeah, that's true. All right, we're gonna jump in. We wanna know, why did you choose Chicago as your headquarters? Let's start there.
Why Chicago? This was, I grew up in Central Florida, right outside of UCF. So my family is from Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana. So shout out to the Caribbean people in the room. And I actually was awarded the Gates Millennium Scholarship to attend Northwestern. And I chose Northwestern because they were the department that invented material science. I was really interested in nanotechnology at the time. Thought it'd be a great place to be. So I kind of came here as a transplant. Did not research and do things in nanotechnology, which I am now. But that's kind of how I ended up in Chicago, where I was just really impressed with one. I could walk to the grocery store and buy milk. That was huge. Didn't have to drive. And then I also found my wife, who I ended up getting married into the city. So, I feel like I'm married into Chicago. And, even when I travel to other communities, I'll say this something that's very unique about Chicago. I've gone to New York, I've gone to Texas, Florida, San Francisco, all over the country. And there is not an event ecosystem like Chicago. When you enter the rooms, the diversity, the welcoming nature, it hits different. And it's not always that way when you hit other different ecosystems. So I think that's a big reason why I like Chicago. And its proximity to fresh water. I think we're very climate resilient.
Say chassis.
Yes, water is key. No, every time I think about moving, a natural disaster happens, and I'm like, I'll stay here. But no, Chicago, we're known as the second city, but we're home to over multiple Fortune 500 companies. And what I mean, excuse me for other things. Us being a second city doesn't mean that we're not a first-class city. We are a first-class city. However, we're viewed differently. So my analogy would be people that watch SNL. A lot of people on SNL went to Chicago, went to second city, learned their craft, and then they went on to be on major TV. So that's what it feels like for me being a tech startup. This is good breeding ground. There's a ton of resources here. There are a ton of companies here. Prior panel, being a product manager and learning on somebody else's time as you hone your skills is key, and that's why I appreciate it.
So for me, I'm a born and raised Chicagoan. I grew up in Hyde Park, and I understood and got to see firsthand how community truly supports one another. My mom was an early childhood teacher who ended up leading the district of office of early childhood here at Chicago Public Schools. My dad was more military and corporate. That kind of gives you a sense of how I got my finance background and MBA there. But it also showed me what community looks like. So when I left the finance world, I moved over into education, started working in the Movement Gresham Network. I grew up through the public education system here, where I had access and resources within Hyde Park. I thought that's what it was common, but that wasn't the case. As soon as I walked into my first building, my second building, my third building, I really recognized the inequities that truly exist within a public education system. So for me, when we took a step outside of Chicago Public Schools, there wouldn't be anywhere else I would want to start. I really appreciated kind of what I was hearing on the last panel around really designing solutions for our end users. We found out from our education leaders where the gaps were, what their pain points were, where they were wasting time so they couldn't focus on relationships. So now for us, knowing that Chicago Public Schools is still our largest partner, knowing that the communities we support around Chicago are now models as we continue to scale. This will always be our headquarters, even though we've expanded internationally now as well. But for us, what Chicago represents to me, let alone the fact that I was born and raised and have the community and still, see my kids, my two young boys kind of growing up through the same streets that I did, I want to make sure that we do have those resources and that all of our communities consistently have access, because at the end of the day, we know there's haves and have-nots in this city. We have to be very intentional about how our communities bring their voices to the table and demand what their resources should be and really create the solutions together. So Chicago will always be home for us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Shout out to the city. And it seems like you're peeking into my notes a bit, because my next question is about the ecosystem within the ecosystem, which is a term we use a lot in the Chi-Tech community to describe kind of what is happening on the south and west sides of the city that isn't happening across the city, or vice versa. So I'm interested in, and anyone can take this one and kick it off, but what has your experience been in that silo of an ecosystem, and how can it function better for founders and builders like yourself?
I feel like we're still building out our ecosystem. Here in Chicago, if you go back probably a decade, there was probably 120 VC shops. Now it's close to 50. But in doing a startup, doing roadshows, pitches, etc., I feel you probably need to have over 100 conversations. And that's kind of the build up muscle of getting used to hearing no. And there are not enough people to go around to say no, and you need to hear that more. So, and what I mean by that is learn from that. I'm not like a mean no type of thing, right?
Encouraging no.
Encouraging no, right? And then, for an ecosystem to exist, it has to be, you have to start making it more natural. You can't just be downtown.
Can I ask you what your personal ecosystem has looked like as you built your business?
It's a little dicey. I would say my personal ecosystem is half here, half California, half Florida. Got into Techstars. applied to 5 different cities, ended up getting in Pennsylvania, which was a good spot to be in. From there, my network grew exponentially, right? So always have to find your network. If your network doesn't exist, go about creating it.
Thanks.
For me, I think we have to be more intentional of bridging the gaps among stages. We have a lot of folks who are in idea stage that need to know what that seed stage looks like. We have Series A stage folks who need to be sharing with our seed stage folks of what those new conversations look like. So when we talk about the ecosystem that I've now interacted with or navigated over the past 7 years, they live in silos, right? And we really have to work towards breaking down those silos, whether it's the education and nonprofit leaders that are on the ground doing the work, or we're a part of the Google for Startups Black Founder Fund and the access that creates, but I don't see any of my educators, I don't see any of my nonprofit leaders in those spaces, or if I'm interacting with our VC folks, right? It's a completely different ecosystem that there are no gaps being free, or no bridges that are building across those gaps. So we have to be very intentional about, we can't just hold the door open anymore. We're pulling people into these rooms and into these spaces and being intentional, because nobody is going to do it for us. Funding is consistently drying up. We got to 2%, and guess what? We're less than 0.5% for VC-backed Black founders now. Like, we have to be intentional about sharing these stories and hearing the no's. Like, they hurt, right? They don't feel good to be told your idea, your solution isn't a problem that needs to be solved. But we need peers around us who are gonna say, hey, don't worry, I've heard that before. We're gonna make it, like, keep pushing. Or, hey, that problem we're trying to solve, is it really the betterment of our community? So what I hear across all of those various conversations are very different, but nobody was there to kind of help us navigate or help me navigate it. It was kind of learn on our own, right? And I'm committed to making sure that other folks don't have to learn on their own. Whether it's an accelerator program or as you're ideating together, it's just finding spaces that we can learn from one another who have gone throughout that journey. So again, like, how do we drive that ecosystem? Like, that's what I'd like to see.
I think Chicago has its own issues when it comes to its diversified economy. Because it's not specialized in one single thing, it's hard for there to get like that momentum you need, specifically when it comes to venture capital. And I know we talk a lot about venture capital, and the focus on that space is because of the amount of equity you get as an owner. It's different. We had a panel around health equity and what do we need around health equity, and Dr. Cheryl Moore, who's done a bunch of work for the South Side of the healthcare system, said, if we want health equity, give me equity. And that's really what we're focusing on. You can do that when you're an entrepreneur. You're able to create equity and ownership of your own business, and that can actually drive your own health outcomes. But the issue is that we do not have that momentum in the big check writers here in the Chicago ecosystem, because we're still trying to validate that, yeah, it's worth investing into us. The vast majority of money is in California, New York, and Boston. If we look at the top 10 industries and the top 10 sectors, on some of those categories, like biotechnology, which is a space that I play in healthcare and hardware, we're not even in the top 10. That it shows why, even at the most elite levels of people who have pedigree and are now getting into venture capital or entrepreneurship, they need to have success. So I think the term that I call this is trickle-down entrepreneurship, which is an unfortunate way to think about this, right? You have to solve the most wealthy person's problem first to justify your startup, right? Because it's hard to work with a bunch of consumers, it's costly, it's expensive, so generally you want to focus on one business owner. It makes it easier to work with that client. But by the time your problem, when you set out to solve that problem, you get to the most amount of people, you've already built this entire ecosystem, you have outside investors that are focused just on solving the business's issues. And I think that's the issue that we're facing, is that as people of color are getting into the ecosystem, when I was the director of platform and community at Good Light Capital, we were investing in people who had MBAs, who went to Harvard, worked at Goldman Sachs, and they were struggling to raise their next round. They are only now just getting into the gate, and so to see them be successful, we really have to bet on the best of the best of the best, and that's gonna be a 5 to 10 year journey before they exit or able to bring that capital back. And the issue now is that now that venture capital assets is drying up, people are looking to invest it differently, saying, oh my gosh, we gave away all this money for 10 years, now let's raise the bar, as soon as we started talking about equity when it came to venture capital. So when we talk about ecosystems, there's this really hyper elite ecosystem in Chicago that that is trying to justify its own existence at the highest level. And so everybody else who's just trying to get started is all clamoring because the resources are only at the top.
Gotcha. The money always gets us hot, right? And as I'm looking around the room and thinking about all the brilliant ideas that are brewing, all the projects that are on their way or in various stages, and on this panel we've got C to Series A folks who have, you have raised the money, you have done it. What is your strongest piece of advice when they walk out the door tonight? What do you want them to know about the fundraising process and how to get things done? A unanimous sigh.
Jokingly and seriously at the same time, I would say we all, it's a book by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference, and we all are hostage negotiators. Understanding what a VC wants, understanding what their thesis is, understanding their vertical, understanding their average check size, and what makes a deal a good deal for them. Going after capital is tough, obviously. Like I say MBA, no MBA. Once you get past all the metrics, it really is just a personal relationship with somebody. You know, I've met people that are VCs that got into the game just because that was their college roommate. It wasn't that they, you know, did the Elon or went to PayPal and then had some crazy exit. It was just right place, right time. This is my friend, I'm in, right? So really, I would say it's almost psychology, where you have to have empathy, lead with empathy, and not putting yourself in somebody else's shoes to really be able to communicate with them. And not necessarily just sympathy, but real empathy. You know you're gonna get no. If you get yes, it's fantastic, but at least you have an understanding of maybe it's just a no right now. It's not a no to you, the regular person.
Good advice.
By a show of hands, who wants to be an entrepreneur in the room? Show of hands, let me see. All right, so we got a great group of people who want to be entrepreneurs, right? And I think the biggest issue I think a lot of people figure out is like, where do I start, right? How do I get that initial momentum? Do I have to go raise a bunch of money? But I would guess that most people want to get in entrepreneurship because they want freedom. And I will highly recommend that you pause and think about your destiny. Because if you want to get into entrepreneurship, being a bootstrap entrepreneur is where the most fun is right now, especially as AI tools are making it easier to build companies, and you can control your own destiny. As soon as you start fundraising, you've essentially given yourself a boss. Is that what you set out to do? And I think a lot of people say, raise money fast, quick, 6-month period. You want to jam in all the conversations. I don't have any network. How am I going to find these people? And I don't know if I like these people. Do I want to be married to you for 10 years after a 2-week conversation? It doesn't really make sense to me. And so after I tried to fundraise in the Chicago ecosystem, talking to 80 different people who all said no, I was like, hold on, who are these people? And so that's why I took a little bit of a pause to get more into the venture capital scene, to understand who are these people. And so I take a stronger partnership approach. Life is hopefully going to be a long journey. Entrepreneurship is going to be a long journey. Take the time to get to know the people first. Whatever you can do, reach out to the people. It doesn't need to be about a pitch. Get to know the individual. So when you do fundraise, you have the right cap table and you're excited and not dreaded. It really comes down to having a partnership mindset. Think about who do you want to bring along that journey, and then focus on that inner work of being authentic, trustful, and really trying to solve a problem. So if you are trying to fundraise, think about this is my personal perspective, think about the long term, spend a few years going to the events, getting to know people. I know there's always a sense of urgency, but think about what type of life do you want to have as you build your company.
So I won't even really talk on the VC side, but know the problem you're solving, right? Know the problem you're solving and know who you're solving